Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. So I don't know about you guys, but lately I feel like I've just been in a bit of a knitting slump, and I think it's because it's summertime and it's just been so hot here. There's a heat wave going on and it just kind of makes me feel less motivated to knit. So I wanted to do this video as kind of like a knitting inspiration to show some ways that we can incorporate things into our knitting that can make it just a little bit more interesting. I find sometimes what's popular in the knitting world and like what's trending right now in the knitting sphere is creating clothes that look like you could have bought it at a shop or like it was a ready-to-wear garment. Whereas I think the really fun and unique part about knitting our own clothes is the fact that we can make it look however we want. We can add details that these fast fashion brands or any like ready-to-wear brands can't really replicate. And so that's kind of what I want to explore today with some of these inspiration points. So I figured I'd take you guys along and show you guys some of the things that I've been really liking that I think are very unique and interesting for adding to our knit pieces. Before we start, I'm wearing my 7 p.m. tank by Tiff Knit, and I really love this top. It is just so comfortable. It's made with 100% cotton, the one that I made. I actually put it in the washing machine and dryer by accident, and it's still perfectly nice condition, so that's really amazing. I don't remember the details of like what the yarn is called, but I can link the Ravelry project in case you guys are curious about this top because I really love this top. So, I forgot to mention too in the beginning, these all are going to work for knit and crochet. It's just in general adding these to knit or crochet pieces, so just keep that in mind. With all that preamble out of the way, I want to share with you guys some really cool little things we can add to our knitting. So the first thing that I'm seeing that I think is really cool to add such a nice touch to our handmade knits is little beaded edges. So it's just little details on, like, I've seen a lot little cuffs and the edges of things, just adding beads and using beads within our knitting is something that I've been seeing that adds such a unique touch to our garments and just really makes them more unique and our own. I just think there's something really cool about adding this because it's something you definitely wouldn't see like ready to wear or fast fashion. It's very much like something you would have to take the time to do. And there's something to be said about adding little tiny details and taking the time to perfect things. I feel like sometimes it's easy to get swept up in trying to get projects done really fast, and just taking the time to add more special details, I think, is making me more aware of what I'm making, slowing me down with what I'm making, and more conscious of like making pieces that I'm really gonna wear that are really unique. Because something I've been really into lately is making pieces that are very wearable and work well in a lot of different situations, just really, gonna fit my body well. They're gonna have the right kind of coverage that I'm going to feel comfortable in, and they're gonna be suitable for the situations in my life, like I go into the office often or going out with friends, like those kinds of things. And so I want my knit pieces to be practical, but I also want them to be a little bit unique and a little bit different, and that's why I really love these little edge details. Another thing too with like, speaking of getting things done and really just slowing down, I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in seeing like a lot of these knitfluencers and like knitting podcasters who show like how many finished objects they're finishing so quickly. And I don't know about you guys, but that is just not realistic for me. I want to sew things too. I want to do different crafts. And not only that, but I find that just even if I was focusing on knitting fully, there's no way I could be getting that much knitting done. And maybe I'm a slower knitter. Maybe I don't have as much time in my life to spend knitting as these people. But basically the moral of that is like, don't feel bad if you're not getting as many finished objects done as these other people. Clearly it's something they have more time to do, or some of them it's even their full-time thing, right? Like they're knitting YouTubers or influencers and they have time to just do that full time. So to each their own, but yeah, slowing down the craft, because at the end of the day, it is a slow craft, and so we shouldn't feel too bad about like taking our time with it and making things perfect. So we talked about having the beads as the details for little sections and just adding them at the edges, but I've also seen people using beads and adding different beads to the entire garment and throughout the garment, and I think this is a really cool, unique way to add a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of uniqueness to pieces. And you don't just have to use beads, you could use sequins, you could use maybe even like a little bit of adding embroidery at the end, just anything to make it feel more personal to you. Because like at the end of the day, the nice thing about knitting is you're gonna be making a very unique piece no matter what, and so just customizing it to be perfect to who you are is such a great part of it. So I really love that, with just adding these little details throughout, adding these little beads throughout. It looks so cool. And then the last one for speaking with knitting and crocheting with beads is actually having the beads be the whole piece. So most examples I found for this were crochet or knit bags where the beads or the sequins are really large, so but the yarn is small, so when you're adding them in, it just makes it so that it's like a beaded bag essentially. This could work with other accessories as well, but there's something so cool about like taking our mind and expanding it when it comes to the craft that we do, because you know, knitting or crochet, we're not necessarily thinking like, oh, I can make this really cool beaded looking bag, and it has a completely different look than if you were to just make a bag that was like crochet, like the Miu Miu bags that are really popular right now. Those are actually really cool, but then you don't really realize you can make these kind of beaded bags. And so I think it's fun to just look at these things too, to see the possibilities of the different things we can do with knitting and crochet. And so I think this is a really fun example of something really unique and really fun that we can do with knitting and crochet. Another way to spice up your crochet or knitting is thinking about the details like buttons. So buttons is a really fun way to add some uniqueness and just add a little pop of detail of something really fun. You can do embroidered buttons, you can add like chains instead of buttons. I've seen that. You can do buttons with little characters on them or different shapes. Anything you want. There's so many possibilities for this, but really don't like skimp out and like work on your knit project. I just want to be done with it and just use some random buttons. I think take the time to look into even like knitted buttons, embroidering them, different interesting looking beads, anything that'll like really show your personality through the ways that you're adding your details to your knitting, I think is so fun. And honestly, whenever I have a project that needs buttons, it gives me this sense of creativity where I really feel like I can play with this a little bit and I can add these little things to make it so much more unique and so much more personal to me. So that's why I think really taking the time to think about buttons and how you can make them more interesting is such a fun way to boost your knitting creativity. So another way to spice up your knitting or crochet is to use something instead of yarn and to get a little bit creative with the materials that you're using. I've seen people use rope or twine to almost get like a basket weave kind of look with their knitting, and like different kind of textured yarn. And then another thing that I've seen to use different materials for knitting is using actual wire to make earrings. There's actually a pattern for this that I will link down below called the Wire Leaf Earrings by Suzanne Summer. She has a series of different earrings you can make with wire, but these are all knit and you use a wire instead of using yarn to get this really interesting look. And this example of the leaf earrings are just so cool. You can also add beads to this too, and I think this is just such a fun way if you're feeling like you're in a knitting slump and you want to get creative again and want to boost your creativity, boost your motivation. This is so fun because you're playing with something new that's gonna like spark some enjoyment. And I think like working with metal and working with wires and something really small and dainty in the summertime when it's so hot, I think that's a little bit more practical, a little bit easier to do instead of like this thick, heavy yarn. You know, this could be a really fun way to keep your knitting up, but you're not working with these like really hot really warm materials. You're using like metal wire. The next way I think you can boost your creativity with knitting is going into your closet and seeing what you can take and add knit or crochet edges to. I think, you know, if you don't necessarily have the motivation to finish a full project, this is a great way to do some knitting or crochet and change one of the pieces that you have to make it more unique and something that you'll wear more, be more fun. And there's some really, really beautiful examples of this. I've seen people just doing like really delicate little crochet edges on like a really silky, beautiful fabric or a cotton fabric. I've even seen people doing crochet or knit edges. Let's say you have a beautiful silk or cotton dress shirt, but then you take off the cuffs and you knit or crochet some cuffs. This looks so beautiful. It's so unique. It's just adding a little bit of a touch of you to pieces that you already have. And I think that's just so wonderful. I've also seen people making little collars that are knit or crochet. And these don't have to be necessarily attached to anything. You can just make the collar. And then if you want to spice up one of your outfits, you can just add the little collar with it and pair it with it like as an accessory. And that's a really fun way to add a little edge if you're too scared to commit to actually crocheting or knitting onto your garment. Just having that little collar piece is a really fun way to do this without like the commitment necessarily. So I think it's a really fun little idea to just spruce up some of the things you have with like the edges. I think that's such a fun look. It's creative. It's different. No one else is gonna have it. And I think that's such a fun thing of like when you have pieces that are so unique and clearly nobody has them. It just looks really cool. I don't know. I think it's really fun. And then the last way I think you can boost your creativity and spark some imagination with your knitting is to add different textures together, different knit textures. And I'm talking like really going all out of like a really lightweight lace and then with like a really thick yarn, changing like the types of yarn, if it's a boucle with a regular yarn or a velvet yarn with a like lace mohair yarn. I don't know, the possibilities are endless, but it gives the same effect that layering does, and then that way you can have this piece that has these really intricate, really beautiful details, sort of like you would get from layering, but you don't have to wear so many different pieces. You kind of have that effect just in the one garment. And so that's a really cool way to spruce things up. It also just like getting more playful with the patterns that are out there already that we're seeing that are popular, but thinking like, oh, I wonder how I can change this to use this different type of textured yarn or do different layers of different textures, I think is such a fun way to make a piece more unique and more personal to ourselves. I know not everyone might be into this kind of style of like mixing textures quite heavily, but I think it looks really, really unique and interesting and just a little bit, just like very fashionable, very couture. I don't know, there's something like really fun about it. So anyway, I am already feeling more inspired to do some knitting. I hope you guys enjoyed these ideas. It's kind of a shorter video, but I just thought it'd be fun to show some of the ideas and things I've been percolating on and thinking about that I would love to add to my own knitting, just to make things a little bit more unique, a little bit more different. I'm kind of sick of seeing like, don't get me wrong, I love a good stockinette piece, but I think I'm just getting bored with myself of just knitting plain old stockinette pieces. So hopefully this can add a little more spark. I'm actually working on a cumulus blouse right now, and I think I want to try the beaded edge technique for the arm or for the sleeves, just to see if I can get something interesting going there and add a little bit more add a little more something to it. So with all that being said, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see me again, because you know how the YouTube algorithm is. One time you'll see me and you'll be like, oh, you never see me again. So if you subscribe, you'll make sure you get to see my videos again. But thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.